आप ठीक हैं प्रभु जी? आप
हाँ हाँ बढ़िया, एकदम बढ़िया। ओम ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वरूपं तदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुवैष्णवं च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहायगण्डगुणात्मकं तं सजीवम् साधुवेतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्ण पदान् सहायगण्डलता श्रीविशाखावेतं च नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णावस्थाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाशदेशतारिणे हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीन बंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिकांतराधे कांत नमस्ते तप्त कंचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वैश्वानसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरि प्रिये वंचा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिंधुवे वचा पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। जय गुरु श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। दीपक प्रू आप स्टार्ट करेंगे तो यहाँ से पढ़ना है।
Yes, Prabhuji, why not? Okay. So, musician, songwriter, and celebrated ex-Beatle George Harrison, serious thinking about reincarnation, is revealed in his private thought on the interpersonal relationship. Friends are all souls that we have known in other lives. We are drawn to each other. That's how I feel about friends. Even if I have only known them a day, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to wait till I have known them for 2 years, because anyway we must have met somewhere before, you know.
Reincarnation is once again attracting the minds of intellectuals and the general public in the West. Films, novels, popular songs, and periodicals now treat reincarnation with ever-increasing frequency, and millions of Westerners are rapidly joining the ranks with the more than 1.5 billion people, including Hindus, Buddhists, Taoists, and members of other faiths who have traditionally understood that life does not begin at birth nor end with death. But simply curiosity or belief is not sufficient. It is merely the first step in understanding the complete science of reincarnation, which includes knowledge of how to free oneself from the miserable cycle of birth and death. Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. Bhagavad Gita, the timeless source or reincarnation. Many Westerners, in order to gain a deeper understanding about reincarnation, are turning to the original source of knowledge about past and future lives. Among all available literature, the Sanskrit Vedas of India are the oldest on earth and present the most comprehensive and logical explanations of the science of incarnation, teaching that have maintained their viability and universal appeal for more than 5,000 years. Right.
The most fundamental information about reincarnation appear in Bhagavad Gita, the essence of Upanishads and of all the Vedic knowledge. The Gita was spoken 50 centuries ago by the Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to his friend and disciple Arjuna on a battlefield in northern India. A battlefield is the perfect place for a discussion about reincarnation, for in combat, men directly confront the fateful questions of life, death, and afterlife.
As Krishna begins to speak on the immortality of the soul, he tells Arjuna, "Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these things, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be." The Gita further instructs that which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. The soul here we speak of something so subtle that it is not immediately verifiable by the limited human mind and senses. Therefore, not everyone will be able to accept the existence of the soul. Krishna informs Arjuna, some look on the soul as amazing Some describe him as amazing and some hear of him as amusing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all.
Accepting the existence of the soul is, however, not merely a matter of faith. Bhagavad Gita appeals to the evidence of our senses and logic. So we may accept his teaching with some degree of faith and conviction and not blindly as dogma.
Yes, Fuji, you can read next paragraph also.
It is impossible to understand the reincarnation unless one knows the difference between the actual self and the body. The Gita helps us see the nature of the soul by the following example. As the sun alone illuminates all the universe, so does the living entity. One within the body illuminates the entire body by consciousness. Yes.
Yes. Consciousness is the concrete evidence of the presence of the soul within the body. On a cloudy day, the sun may not be visible, but we know it is there in the sky by the presence of sunlight. Similarly, we may not be able to directly perceive the soul, but we may conclude it is there by the presence of consciousness. In the absence of consciousness, the body is simply a lump of dead matter. Only the presence of consciousness makes the lump of dead matter breathe, speak, love, and feel. In a sense, the body is a vehicle for the soul, through which it may fulfill its myriad material desires. The Gita explained that the living entity within the body is seated as on a machine made of the material energy. The soul falsely identifies with the body, carrying its different conception of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Just as an automobile cannot function without the presence of a driver, similarly, the material body cannot function without the presence of a soul.
Hmm. As one grows older, this distinction between the conscious self and the physical body becomes more obvious. Within his lifetime, a person can observe that his body is constantly changing. It does not endure, and time proves the child ephemeral. The body comes into existence at a certain time, grows, matures, produces byproducts, children, and it gradually dwindles and dies. The physical body is thus unreal for it, will in due time disappear. As the Gita explains, of the non-existent there is no endurance, but despite all the changes in the material body, consciousness, a symptom of the soul within remains unchanged. Of the eternal there is no change. Therefore, we may logically conclude that consciousness possesses an innate quality of permanence that enables it to survive the dissolution of the body. Krishna tells Arjuna, for the soul, there is neither birth or nor death in time. He is not slain when the body is slain. Yes, Guruji.
Yes. But if the soul is not slain when the body is slain, then what becomes of it? The answer given in the Bhagavad Gita is that the soul enters another body. This is reincarnation. This concept may be difficult for some people to accept, but it is a natural phenomenon. And the Gita gives logic examples to add our understanding. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into the another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change.
In other words, man reincarnates even in the course of one lifetime. Any biologist will tell you that the body cells are constantly dying and being replaced by new ones. In other words, each of us has number of different bodies in this very life. The body of an adult is completely different from the body the same person had as an infant. Yet, despite bodily changes, the person within remains the same. Something similar happens at the time of death. The self undergoes the final change of body. The Gita says, as a person puts on new garments, give up old ones, and the soul similarly accepts the new material bodies, giving up the old ones and useless ones. Thus, the soul remains entrapped in an endless cycle of birth and death. One who has taken his birth is sure to die, and after that, one is sure to take birth again. The Lord tells Arjuna. That's true.
Yes. According to the Vedas, there are 84 like species of life, beginning with the microbes, rising through the fish, plants, insects, reptiles, birds, and animals to the human and demigods. According to their desires, the living entity perpetually take birth in this species.
ईशु प्रभु आप पढ़ेंगे?
The mind in the mind is the mechanism that directs these transmigration, propelling the soul to newer and newer bodies. The Gita explains, whatever state of being one remembers many state he will attain without fail in his next life. Everything we have thought and done during our life makes an impression on the mind, and the sum total of these impressions influence our final thoughts at death. According to the quality of these thoughts, material nature of award us according to the quality of these thought, material nature award us the body. Therefore, the type of body that we know that we have now is the expression of our consciousness at the time of our last death. Hare Krishna.
The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. The Gita explains further the path of reincarnation does not always lead uphill. The human being is not guaranteed a human birth in his next life. For example, if one dies with the mentality of a dog, then he will in his next life receive the eyes, ears, nose, etc. of a dog, thus allowing him to enjoy canine pleasures. Lord Krishna confirms the fate of such an unfortunate soul, saying, when one dies in the mode of ignorance, he takes birth in the animal kingdom. Just to give a proof.
Yes, Roji, sorry. According to the Bhagavad Gita, humans who do not inquire about their non-physical higher nature are compelled by the laws of karma to continue in the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, sometimes appearing as human, sometimes as animal, and sometimes as plants or insects.
You should prove.
Our existence in the material world is due to the multiple karmic reaction of this and previous lives. And the human body provides the only loophole through which the material conditioned soul can escape. By properly utilizing the human form, one can solve all the problems of life, birth, death, disease, and old age, and break the endless cycle of reincarnation. If, however, a soul having evolved to the human platform waste his life by engaging only in activities for sense pleasure, he can easily create sufficient karma in this present life to keep him entangled in the cycle of birth and death for thousands upon thousands of life. And they may not all be humans. Hare Krishna.
The Lord Krishna says, the foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly, but those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try to. A soul fortunate enough to obtain a human body should seriously endeavor for self-realization to understand the principle of reincarnation and become free from repeated birth and death. We cannot afford not to. Yes, Deepak too.
Yes, chapter 2, Changing Bodies. In 1974, at the ISKCON Center in the countryside near Frankfurt, West Germany, His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada had the following dialogue with the professor Carl Fried Graf von Durk- Durkheim. Professor Durkheim, a noted religious psychologist and author of Daily Life as Spiritual Exercise, holds a PhD in analytical psychology and is renowned for establishing a therapeutic school in Bavaria that incorporates both Western and Eastern approaches to the psychology of the consciousness. In this conversation, Srila Prabhupada explained the first and the most basic principle of reincarnation, that the spiritual living entity is different from the material body. After establishing that the conscious self and the body are separate entities, Srila Prabhupada described how the conscious self or soul perpetually transmigrates to another body at the time of death. इसमें तो dialogues हैं.
Yes, indeed. ईश्वर प्रभु आप ये कंप्लीट डायलॉग हम मतलब पढ़ लीजिए please.
Professor Durkheim, in my work, I have found that natural ego, if you go through it, a near-death experience, you seem to cross a threshold of death to quite a different, to quit a different reality. Srila Prabhupada, yes, it is different. The experience is like that of a diseased person regaining his health. Professor Durkheim, so the person who is dead, experiences a higher level of reality. So the person who is dead experiences a higher level of reality. Srila Prabhupada, it is not the person who has died, but the body. According to the Vedic knowledge, the body is always dead. For example, a microphone is made of metal. When electric energy passes through the microphone, it responds by converting sound into electrical impulses, which are amplified and broadcast over loudspeaker. But when there is no electricity in the microphone, whether the microphone is working or not, it remains nothing metal, plastic, etc. Similarly, the human body works because of the living force within. When the living force leaves the body, it is said that the body is dead, but actually it is always dead. The living force is an important element. Its presence alone makes the body appear to be alive. But the physical body is nothing more than a collection of dead matters. Hare Krishna.
कंप्लीट कर दीजिए please.
The first teaching of Bhagavad Gita reveals that the condition of the material body is ultimately not very important. Asochan, aso, asogyan, avana, sorry, I'm reading it wrong. Prabhu, आप पढ़ सकते हैं इसे?
थोड़ी ट्राई कर सकता हूँ. असोच्यन अन्वशोकास्त्वं प्राणवदं च भाषा से गतासुन्नगतसुं च नानु शोचन्ति पंडितः.
The blessed Lord said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what it is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Bhagavad Gita 2.11. The dead body is not a real subject for philosophical inquiry. Rather, we should concern ourselves with the active principle, that the principle which makes the dead body move the soul. Professor, how do we teach our disciples to become aware of this force, which is not a matter, but which makes matter appear alive? I can intellectually appreciate that you are speaking a philosophy which contains the truth. I don't doubt it. But how do you make a person to feel it? Hare Krishna. आगे भी पढ़ूं प्रभु.
ये तो
Srila
आगे.
Prabhupada.
Yes, 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 yes.
It is very simple matter. There is an active principle which makes the body move. When it is absent, the body no longer moves. So the real question is, what is the active principle? This inquiry lies at the heart of Vedanta philosophy. In fact, Vedanta Shastra begins with the Asho Apoharam Adato Brahma Jigyasa. What is the nature of self within the body? Therefore, the student of Vedic philosophy is first taught to distinguish the difference between a living body and a dead one. If he is unable to grasp this principle, we then ask him to consider the problem from the standpoint of logic. Anyone can see that the body is changing and moving because of the presence of the active principle, the soul. In the absence of the active principle, the body neither changes nor moves. So there must be something within the body that makes it move. It is not a very difficult concept. The body is always dead. It is like a big machine. A tape recorder is made of a dead matter, but as soon as the living person push a button, it works. Similarly, the body is also a dead matter. But within the body is the life force. As along this active principles remains within the body responds and appears alive. For instance, we all have the power to speak. If I speak to one of my students to come here, he will come. But if the active principle leaves his body, I may call him for thousands of years, but he will not come. This is very simple to understand. But what exactly is the active principle? That is a separate subject matter, and the answer to that question is a real beginning of spiritual knowledge. Professor, understand the point you have made about the dead body, that there must be something within to make it alive. The only proper conclusion is that we are talking about two things, the body and the active principle. But my real question is, how do we become aware of the active principle within ourselves as a direct experience and not simply as an intellectual conclusion? On the inner path, isn't important to actually experience this deeper reality. Prabhupada, you yourself are the active principle. The living body and the dead body are different. The only difference is the presence of the active principle. When it is not there, the body is so-called dead. So the real self is identical with the active part, active principle. In the Vedas, we find the maxim, Soham, I am the active principle. It is also called Aham Brahmasmi. I am not this material body. I am a Brahman, the spirit. That is self-realization. The self-realized person is described in Bhagavad Gita. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na sochati na kanchati. When one is realized, he neither anchors nor lament. Sama sarveshu bhuteshu. He is equal to everyone, men, animals, or living beings. Professor, consider this one of our students might say, I am spirit, but he might not able to experience it. Prabhupada, how can he not experience it? He knows that he is the active principle. Everyone ultimately knows that they are not the body. Even a child knows it. We can observe this by examining that way we speak. We say that this is my finger. We never say I finger. So what is that I? This is a self-realization. I am not this body. And this realization can be extended to other living beings. Why does man kills animal? Why gives troubles to other? One who is self-realized can see here is another self. He simply has a different body, but the same active principle that exists. That exists within my body is operating within his body. The self-realized person sees all the living entities with the equal vision, knowing that the active principle, the self, is present not only in human beings but within the bodies of animal, birds, fish, insect, trees, and plants as well. Reincarnation is the प्रभु रुक जाए क्या?
हाँ यहाँ पे रुक जाते हैं है ना, तो साथ हो गया, थोड़ा सा डिस्कस कर लेते हैं फिर बैकअप करते हैं फिर। Okay, so Deepak Prabhu, you want to share something?
मुझे तो बस ज़्यादा तो समझ में नहीं आया, क्योंकि तो मुझे बस इतना ही समझ में आया कि soul transmigrated the body from one body to another body.
Yes, Guruji.
Yes, Prabhuji. This
Anything
is
else?
what I understood.
ठीक है.
Yeah, as you highlighted.
हाँ, ये एग्जांपल बहुत अच्छा लगा था मुझे माइक्रोफोन वाला.
Oh,
माइक्रोफोन में जब इलेक्ट्रिसिटी पास होती है, मतलब औरों को देने के लिए इलेक्ट्रिसिटी जब पास होती है तो then it is useful, otherwise it is just a dead matter of material or other things. तो हमारा बॉडी भी सिंपली ऐसी है कि कॉन्शियसनेस नहीं होगी अगर, मतलब कॉन्शियसनेस इज अ फीचर ऑफ अ सोल.
right.
कॉन्शियसनेस जो है वो फीचर है सोल का. मतलब जैसे कभी कल भी हम पढ़ रहे थे, उसमें ये बता रहे थे कि जैसे आग है उसके साथ हीट आती है, तो जो स्पिरिट है उसके साथ कॉन्शियसनेस आती है. तो
Yes.
जहाँ स्पिरिट होगी वहाँ कॉन्शियसनेस होगी. तो जिसके अंदर कॉन्शियसनेस है, जिसके अंदर चेतना है, इट मीन्स तो उसके अंदर स्पिरिट है. और इसमें प्रभुपाद ये भी बताए हैं कि मतलब वो ये कि हम शरीर के लेवल पे ना सोच के, हमें यहाँ बता रहे हैं ब्रह्म भूता प्रसन्नात्मा, व्हेन वन इज सेल्फ रियलाइज्ड इन अदर हैंकर्स नो लैमेंट समः सर्वेषु भूतेषु ही इज इक्वल टू एवरीवन मैन एनिमल्स एंड ऑल द लिविंग बीइंग्स. तो ये मेरे को थोड़ा
Yes.
हाँ, अभी आज का तो बहुत बेटर था. अगर आप कल आते परसों आते तो
Oh.
आप कहते कि ये चल क्या रहा है.
Hmm.
आज तो फिर भी प्रभुपाद
Okay.
बहुत बहुत सिंपल चल रहा है. आज तो
Ah.
समझ ही नहीं आ रहा. ठीक है. ईशु प्रभु, यू वांट टू शेयर समथिंग?
प्रभा की कॉन्वर्सेशन में से एक पॉइंट अच्छा लगा था कि दैट वी already had that feeling of self-realization, but we do not want to accept it. But we never says that we, matlab, I finger, we always says this finger. So I is something very different, and that is a part of self-realization. And we not accept it in our daily life. And if we tell to another person that he is not bound to believe it, but though there's a sense of self-realization in every person, it is a matter of time and the correct knowledge and the bona fide masters to get him know that he is on the path, but he is never going to realize until and unless he wants to know. That self-realization is something that person has to do by his or own effort, but nobody is going to tell him that until unless he is curious to know about the self-realization and about the spiritual journey of this life. So one has to make efforts. That is what I get to know from Prabhupada talks, that that one has to individually put efforts for spiritual life to attain some platform in spiritual life. Yeah, this is what I. जैसे materially हम सब जगह हाथ पैर मारते रहते हैं आगे बढ़ने के लिए. Life is something that we are the only person who is going to help us, and we have to put in that. हमें अपने आप को रखना पड़ेगा ऐसे सिचुएशंस में जहाँ पे हम ज्ञान ले पाए, सही ज्ञान ले पाए इन चीजों का.
सही कहा आपने, बिल्कुल ऐसी
Yeah.
पोजीशन में रखना पड़ेगा.
Right. That is why I understand. Yeah.
Okay. So, anything anyone wants to add? Okay, we can stop now. पंचा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यश्च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. जगद्गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Thank you,
joining.
Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining, everyone.